Right. Hey everybody, I am real excited today. I have Mike Schacht on there on the podcast today. We have him. He's from 312 Elements out of Chicago. He's a headshot photographer, personal branding, you name it. This guy is a rock star. If you go to his website, his website is like one to be admired. I love his website. He's got so many great stuff, and I've watched him over the years, watch that website grow, and it's amazing what you've done with that website. But we're going to talk a little bit about it, a little bit of everything. I shouldn't say everything, but a little here and there, but mostly about websites. Mike is a genius when it comes to like website stuff. I've been following with he's got a group called Headshot Hot Sauce, and they talk about websites and maximizing your websites and stuff like that. So Mike, I'm so glad to have you on the show today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. We don't get to connect as often as we probably should. And the handful of times we have, there is a lot of overlap in interests. So they're usually great conversations. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
No, I'm glad you're here, man. Like, I think the last time you and I had an in-depth conversation was at the Headshot Hideaway 2 years ago when we were seeing each other in person for the first time, which was awesome. So I want to get started. Just kind of give everybody a little background on what you do, how you got kind of into the photography business, and like I know you're on the headshot branding kind of thing. What do you do, and how did you get there?
Wow.
You can keep
So
it short.
it's not the most linear story, but the shortest version is once upon a time, shortly out of college, I was in the world of selling lumber, and I drove a car around with a sticker on the side that says "Got Wood," and uh,
Nice.
and for
Catchy.
like exactly for like 5 or 6 years, that was my life. There were a couple detours, but then going into 2008, that turned into be like not an awesome job to have, selling building materials to home builders. There wasn't a lot of building going on in 2008, so they actually closed my store. They offered me a job in a different market and suggested that I uproot my stuff and move and do all that stuff. And I was like, this isn't my dream job. Like this is the job I got. Um, and I didn't see myself doing that forever. So it seemed like a good time to just cut ties. So at the moment, I was living in the middle of downtown Chicago, and if you're a Wilco fan, you might recognize the Marina City. They're the corncob buildings in the skyline. That's where I lived, and it's very like central to downtown. And the first thing I did was I started building websites for my builders, and we were hiring photographers for a lot of these gigs because they needed pictures of the house, and was like, I think I could do that. So, fast forward a couple weeks, I grab enough gear on Craigslist and for 500 or 600 bucks to be able to do what I thought I needed to do to help these people. And that led to photographing families on the weekend in the park. And that led to a big Groupon deal where we sold 400 photo shoots in about a year. Actually, we sold them in about 3 days, and I had a year to fulfill them. And that was my photography school. Like
You just went right into it, and like no
100%.
education. You just like, hey, I'm gonna throw it for. I mean, Groupon. I mean, that's like going really over the top.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, but it's 2009 at this point.
Totally.
So I went to high school with, was working there, and said, "Hey, I'm going to help you promote your business." And she's like, "How many do you think you can do?" I said, "Well, I can do more than you can sell." I had no idea what Groupon was at the time. So she came back a few days later and said, "Okay, we sold 400." And I was like, "Oh,
I should have stuck my foot in my mouth and said I could do is more than you could sell. That's a year's worth of photo sessions right there, man.
Well, and the real funny thing is, if you understand how Groupon works, like most people spend so little money on those things, they don't really value them.
Yeah.
And what wound up happening was we sold 400. I got through October. Like this happened in December. We got all the way through October, and only 100 of them had been fulfilled.
Oh
So
wow.
from October through the end of the year, because there was a 12-month expiration on it, in those last couple months of the year, we shot the 300 people that had put it off. Um, so it
How was,
was,
I'm
yeah,
just out of
definitely a learning curve.
curiosity. I mean, I know it was 2009. I don't know if I would recommend doing Groupon now, but how were the sales with that? Was it worth the energy and the time? I mean, or was it you just did a lot of freebie stuff for very, very little money?
I don't regret doing it. I also wouldn't recommend people do it. Bottom line was the revenue that that generated was enough to pay for my studio for the first year. And I don't think that we'd be sitting here talking today. Like, I don't think I would have ever gotten a studio if I didn't get that little cash injection.
No,
Did I do everything right? No, no.
you were
Did
learning as you go, man. It sounds like.
did I have an opportunity to upsell these people and make more money? No. And live and learn, like it was an expensive lesson, but what I really learned that year was how to manage a photo shoot, how to manage expectations, how to manage people. Um, I went from like one day I would be photographing a birthday party, and then the next day somebody would have me at their wedding for an hour, and then the next day it'd be a bar mitzvah. Like it was everything, but probably 20 or 30 of those sessions were headshot sessions, and I was like, I like this. This is one-on-one. This is a controlled environment because we're in the studio. This is um, something where I'm actually feeling like I'm building a relationship with people. So I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And then I found Peter, and then headshot crew and all the rest of that stuff. And now 15-ish years later, still in the same studio. Um, my business looks very different now, and I think that I'm a much smarter business owner because of it.
Yeah. Well, and that's such a like that's one of the big things I harp on a lot, especially on here or anytime I talk to photographers. It's like you can be a photographer, but you got to be a business person. I would venture to say you might agree or you might disagree. I know you have strong opinions about things, as we talked about before the recording is, 80% of what we do is business. 20% is the photography. It's like, but I think a lot of photographers look at it the other way around. It's 80% it should be the photography and 20% of the business. And those are usually the people that struggle because they're spending so much time just on the photography side of things. So,
Oh, for sure. Our work only has to be so good to meet the criteria of our clients, and I will absolutely concede that. The flip side of that is that the people that do it better um, and do it for the right reasons, I think, have an easier time on the marketing end of things, um, because they're not doing it to make a buck. They're doing it because they do what they love, and as long as you can figure out how to like have a perspective on that and
yeah,
then frame that perspective, share that perspective, whether we're
yeah,
talking about social or websites or whatever. Um, the the voices of the people that are photographers first and business people second. Um, I think that they are better communicators.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a place, and it's important to have both. But it's just like when you don't focus on any of the business aspect, that's where you're like,
100%.
okay, I'm not getting clients. Well, what are you doing to get clients? I'm just taking pretty pictures. Well, that's not going to necessarily always get you clients. You got to be able to market and do other things as well too. I know I want to talk like website and some, I know we mentioned before the recording is like. I want to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on Google ads and stuff. But before we get there, I have observed you for a number of years and I've observed your website for a number of years. And I've loved the transformation I have seen over the years of your website specifically. I remember back, I don't know how long ago, but it was a long time ago when I first started kind of following your stuff. Your headshot, your website was just very uh, business corporate look and feel and like that Peter Hurley kind of, and I know you were working with Peter Hurley and so that's kind of a normal thing, but man, I got to give you props over the years. What you have going on now on your website and the photos and the portrait side of things that you've done is just outstanding. Like you have taken it to a whole nother world. So talk a little bit about how that transition happened from like, hey, I'm just a headshot, like I'm a square guy with like, here's move your head here, here, and here. And that's what was mostly on your website to now it's like you got that part still, but you have all this other beautiful work that people are doing with you. And it's not just a standard headshot that you're going to put on LinkedIn.
Totally. That is a it's going to take a minute to unpack that.
No, you're good.
So I jumped on your website today, and one of the first things I noticed was that there were parts of your website that felt familiar to me. So what I haven't really recognized until recently is that even for people that never made it into Headshot Hot Sauce, our influence is much greater than the subscribers or the members of the
Right.
community, because as a group, photographers and even more specifically headshot photographers, they just copy each other.
Yeah.
And then so like I'm looking at your website, I'm like, oh, this portion here, Mike and I created that, and this portion here, Mike and I created
No,
that.
I'm not gonna lie. I was like going through. I'm like, I like these pieces here, and I like these pieces here, and it's hard because it's like if you go to a lot of headshot photographers like that I see, it is like what you're saying. It's all the same. It's all like everything is the same, and it's but for the client, they don't know that, because they're not going and searching like 20 different headshot photographers. But us as photographers, I like to see what other people are doing and stuff. And so there is that element of it.
I think that it's a bigger problem than what you're letting on.
Right.
And I'm just gonna pick on some buzzwords. Um, like on your website, I think that you've got a reference to elevating something. There's probably some confidence and approachability at some point. There's probably something about being a headshot specialist or an expression coach or whatever. Like there are buzzwords in this industry that people have latched onto and they've associated with their own brand. And sometimes that gets to be such a big thing that they don't recognize that now they're not actually saying anything, because if I'm on 20 is excessive, but I would imagine that most of our customers have been on 4 or 5 different websites in our own market before they choose to work with us, if they found us through search. And that's something we'll talk about later.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, if everybody's saying the same thing, then it means nothing. And then that's why I've pivoted so hard is I no longer stood out, and I'm air quoting that because that's another thing that like everybody says on their website. It's stand out from the crowd and get noticed. And um, uh, it all becomes so cliche that what you're really doing and not realizing it, not you personally, but like collectively,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the industry is you're negatively impacting your brand by association.
Right.
If somebody is on 5 websites and they all feel exactly the same, you've done nothing to differentiate yourself.
Right.
You've done nothing to position yourself as a better solution to the problem. Um,
Well,
so
and full disclosure on my headshot, especially part of the website, I haven't done anything to update that in ages, and it's something that's long overdue that I need to do. But I haven't had time to do it, and it's not been on the forefront of everything that I'm doing. So I don't take it a
you're
personal affront at all.
you're clearly successful, and that's another point is that a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm going to solve my not having business problem by creating a better website. And yes, that's probably going to help, but I know lots of people with horrible websites that are very busy. And it's not because they're cheap either. Um, uh, the website can be super important. It's something I think we should focus on, but it's not a solution to a problem. It's just
Right.
part of our having an actual brand. Um, yeah, that's
No, and I think you make a great point when you're talking about differentiating yourself when it comes to the website type of thing, because you're in Chicago. I mean, that's a huge market. And I know like in the headshot world, just in the Peter Hurley headshot crew, there's a
I
number
think
of
we've got a
you from.
dozen associates.
Yeah, yeah, like and you're all associates, so you're at like the premier level of what you want to be, and several of you are mentors, which is even higher than that associate level, and you're all in the same market. So if you go to the 4 or 5 or 6 different people that are in Chicago that you would find if I did a headshot search, and they're all the same, and then they come across your website, which is different. That's gonna like, just my wife and I were talking about this yesterday. business is a psychological thing for clients just as much as it is anything else. You know, how you price things, how you word things, how you put things on a pricing sheet, if you know, or like we were talking about pricing and specifically, and I had made some tweaks on my pricing and it was negatively affecting my business. And I'm like, oh, I got to go back to what I was doing before. I just wanted to test this out and see how it was working. But and it wasn't like a huge change, but it was a change that was negatively affecting things, but you don't know if it's going to negatively or positively unless you try it. Same thing with your website. You don't know if it's negatively or positively going to affect your business or your whatever until you actually try and do it, you know? So I think that's a great point of being different. Set yourself outside the crowd because I'm with you. I think in the headshot world, more than anything, there are the buzzwords. Facial expression coach is one of the big ones that I probably have on my website, and I hate it. You know, it's just like because if I was a consumer and I would read that, I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? You know what I'm saying? And
And to be fair though, like I am all for I attribute that to John Meadows. I am all for John Meadows taking that and running with it. Like he carved something out and said, "This is me." My issue is with everyone else that copied him. Like
no, I
he,
know, I get it, I get it, and I'm not like just totally negating what that is, but it's just like but everybody like it's like you're saying everybody's doing it and I'm probably one of those that have said it or it might even be there right now. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I will also say this too, and I've mentioned this in other podcasts. The website is just a tool, and like you said, you know, I mean, when I first started my business and it took off, if you were to I was advertising myself as a family black and white photographer, you know, and if you were to go to my website, all you would see was senior high school photos, you know, and so it's just like, but I was getting business, I was getting clients, I was making money. And my point being is like, your website is a tool, but it's not the means to actually draw everybody in, you know? And so if you're just focusing on, if I fix my website, then they will come, that's not, there's so many other pieces to the puzzle with that, you know? I mean, and that's just, it's just a tool to help bring people in, but it's not going to fix your problems, right? So I know you have like the headshot hot sauce. How long you guys been running that? Like, you've been doing that for a while.
17.
17. So you've been doing that for a while, and I'm sure I haven't followed as much as I used to, but and I'm sure it's grown and evolved just like, you know, your website has evolved and grown and all that stuff. And I know like you look at a lot of people's websites and stuff, and I know we talked on a couple of those things, but what is something that people could be doing better in your mind on their websites to make it work better and help grow their business?
So this gets into psychology, which has been my passion probably like from the start of the pandemic on. Like I just got into psychology. And it's a difficult thing to answer because most of us are trying to attract as much business as we can. So if I can make that statement, I want to attract as much business as I can. I've done nothing to narrow in on who my target audience is.
Hmm.
One of the things that I like to say is that if you're not turning anyone off, you're not turning anyone on. Like, and that's we need to exclude some portion of the audience to be able to speak to the audience that really wants to engage with us. So the first thing that I would suggest is have a point of view. And don't be afraid to share it, whether we're talking website or social or any of it. Having a point of view, people can connect, consumers can connect with a point of view. They have a hard time connecting with pictures of strangers. So if I'm the type of, and I've got no problem saying that I'm a darn good photographer. Like I'm very proud of what I do. I think I'm great at it. And I think that I provide a great service to my clients. Um, so I'm in a better position than most to be able to just let my work do the talking and say less and try to attract people that way. The problem is that most of my customers haven't been to a museum in a decade. They scroll social media at mock speed, and and our work isn't really something that they're going to be able to, they're going to feel comfortable speaking about. Like they don't have a point of view about our work because it's not something that they consider themselves an expert at. So, and I'm going to try not to like get too convoluted here, but the answer in everything is lean into whoever you are harder. Um, because that is what makes you unique. That is what people are going to connect with. It's not likely going to be your work. It's going to be what you choose to share, and you're in complete control of that. But the less you choose to share, the bigger, the harder you have to go on what you do share. So like somebody that's truly an open book, and they are like, I think Peter approaches social as an open book.
Right, right. He just lives his life and he shows it to you in video. Lots of stories.
And people love that because whether it's New Year's Day and he's jumping in a tub full of cold water
Or a
on his
bird
balcony,
pooping on his phone the other day.
yeah, that's fairly relatable stuff. People feel comfortable commenting on that type of content. You put all of the emphasis on your pictures, then you're going to attract a very small group of people that feel comfortable, A, feel comfortable talking about pictures, and B, also like the pictures that you make. So taglines can be helpful, and sharing personal bits can be helpful. If you go to the About Me page on my website, which you probably didn't even make it to, but like, I've got a composite of me in, I don't know, there's 6 or 7 different outfits. I'm holding my guitar, I'm listening to headphones, I'm sharing, I'm communicating like this is who I am, this is what I enjoy. I've got coffee, I'm a big coffee person. All of these things are way easier for people to connect with than my images. And the more they like me,
Yeah.
the more likely they are to work with me. I think it was, we were talking about Headshot Hideaway. So the same one you were at, my buddy Joe was there, and we were talking at one point, and he was expressing how his clients invite him to parties. And it's not something that had ever happened to me before. And I said, tell me more about this. He's like, well, they're having their annual Christmas party, or they're having friends over, like I get invited. And I was like, tell me more. Tell me, like, I want to know how you accomplish this, because I feel bad or badly that nobody's ever invited, none of my clients have invited me to a party. What am I doing wrong?
Right.
And I left there, like, of all of the people I talked to on that trip, that was the most important conversation. And I left there and immediately tried to think about ways to get invited to parties. But what does that really mean? That
But no,
really
you're building the relationship with the people.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, so and so like I love you saying that, because when I open up your website, the first thing that I see is relational. You know, it's you and this woman on a couch looking at photos. That's the first photo you see when you go to your website. And I've always admired that photo. I think it's awesome. But it's relational, and both of you are smiling, and you feel like if just your instant connection, like for me, your instant connection is like, hey, that's a likable dude, and I love that photo that's on the TV screen, and she looks like she's having a great time, you know. And so you've done that. You connected with me as soon as I walked into your, onto your website, and so I think that's part of what you're talking about right there.
100%. But yeah, everyone that walks through my door now, not only do I want to get a great picture of them, I
Want to
am
get invited to their party.
I, I want to be their friend. So
No,
like,
totally, I get it. But that's what I mean. Is like you want to
yeah,
become friends with them in the sense it's not just a business transaction for you. It's we're transactioning, but I want to know you on a level outside of what we're just doing here, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So to that point, so then it was like, okay, how do I solve this problem? Do you mind if I talk about that?
No, absolutely. I love it.
So one of the things that, as my kids have gotten older, I've got a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, both little ladies, and we have a lot of fun. And one of the things we do together is bake. So on Sundays we bake cookies for the studio. We bake muffins for around the house. Every now and again, if there's time, we'll make a cake to eat for dessert for the week. But every time somebody walks through the door of the studio, like every new client, I throw a couple of frozen cookie balls. Like we make the balls and we don't bake them yet. So I throw a couple of frozen cookie balls into the oven at the studio, and when they walk through the door of the studio, the
They
first thing they smell is
smell cookies.
cookies, uh,
Nice.
which psychologically, like, probably takes you back to being a kid. And you think about who in your life makes the best cookies, and or any like positive experience. Not many people have super negative experiences around cookies.
Right.
And because I've got celiac disease, like these are all gluten-free cookies. And when I run across other gluten-free clients, they're like, you make not only great cookies, but like they're also gluten-free. This is amazing. Um,
Well, and
so
it's an instant connection. You talk about the psychology. One thing that I thought about, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just have to say this is one of the things I think about with that is as soon as you walk in, a lot of people that are coming in and getting a headshot or a portrait or something like that, they come in nervous. And if you
100%.
walk in and you smell those cookies, now your nerves have gone, oh, cookies. And you're not thinking about the nerves that you have of is my hair going to be right? Is my makeup done right? Am I screwing myself over this with this stuff? You're just like, oh, I'm going to get a cookie. It smells like here, I mean, and now you're totally like the psychology has worked. That's awesome. Now I need an oven in my studio. I don't have one, but I have a pie shop next door. Maybe I can have them bake me
Yo,
some cookies. It just
team
won't
up.
smell in my studio. It'll smell in their pie shop.
Um, so that was like phase one. And I get to talk about my girls and I make these for you, and I introduce myself as a dad at that point, which most of my clients are between the ages of 35 and 55 probably, and they've got their own story of being a parent
Yeah.
or being an aunt or uncle. Like, usually when it comes to children, people feel comfortable talking about whatever connection they have to kids in their life. So that's a connection point. I ask them if they want water or coffee. And if they say coffee, I start grinding beans and doing a pour over, which is something that I feel a lot of people have never experienced before. So they get a kick out of like seeing that process and how all of that works. And because I'm not staring at them, asking them questions, like it's just much more conversational. I'm stirring and chatting, and it just becomes this friendly atmosphere that really works to my advantage. So then, as the shoot goes on, one of the questions I ask everyone that comes through the door is, "You're on a desert island, and you're only able to take one album with you. Like, what music do you want to listen to on repeat for the next 5 years?" And then I go on to explain that I've built this vinyl collection 100% based on recommendations from clients. I'm going to go purchase the album you suggest. I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to shoot you an email and tell you what I think about it. Um, and that allows me to kind of keep the relationship and the conversation going. I'm a big texter.
Uh-huh.
Prefer to communicate with everyone via text, and I try and train people for that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got your text messages for this, like, hey, reminder,
Right, right, right.
this is, I do the same type of
I'm a
stuff.
big texture guy too. Like it's one of the big things I push and I teach within business. It's like, I use a service that's like we text everything. I don't even have a call person anymore, like that makes phone calls and stuff for us. It's everything's done text and they book themselves over text. And I mean, and I have clients tell me straight up, they're like, I prefer it this way. I don't care. I don't want you to call me. I had somebody yesterday in a sales session goes, I'm not generation X or Z or any of that kind of stuff. And she was more my age. And she goes, but I would prefer you just text me, so I'm not going to be calling you and I don't want you calling me, you know?
Uh,
So,
but when I go to the record store, I am texting pictures to the clients from the record store, and they get a kick out of like, hey, you made a suggestion and I took action, And I wasn't just talking the talk, I'm walking the walk too. And again, I'm going to go home and listen to it and tell you what I think. And maybe that keeps the conversation going. Maybe that leads to, hey, next time you're going to the record store, can I come along? Like I've been going record shopping with clients. I've been going to museums with
Right.
clients. People, what I think most of us fail to realize is that we are the most interesting people that most of our clients come into contact with over a 6, 8, 10 week period of time. Like we are the closest thing to rock stars that they know. We
Yeah.
work for ourselves. We're in a creative industry. Many of us consider ourselves to be artists. And there's something a little bit aspirational about that, even if it's just a, man, I wish I could do that, but I don't have the confidence to. People want to know more about us, and for whatever reason, most of us, most photographers, try to draw this line of like, okay, here's my personal life. I can't be honest with the client. I have to present myself as this big puffy business. So you do things on your website like saying we. I mean, you have employees. You can say we. Most photographers say we, and most photographers don't have employees. So
It's just me. You
you're
got
trying
the
to
you got the
this.
W upside down, man.
Yeah.
No, that's so you did mention something about like excluding, like, how do you like, what do you define that? Like, what do you mean by excluding people? Like, how do you exclude somebody that's just like, you're not the right person for me?
You can do that with your pricing. So there's all sorts of talk on like what's the best pricing strategy, and should your session fee be high or should your per image fee be high, and blah 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 blah. I think a lot of that influences the type of client that you attract. So if you've got a lot of people, what they'll do is, I think the most popular thing I see is what they call one-to-one pricing. And it's my session fee is $250 and my image fee is about $250 for whatever reason they, shave off a couple dollars, thinking that they're going to fool people, but that's just BS as well. But I think that attracts a certain type of client, because what our customers are automatically doing is saying, okay, well, 250 plus 250 is $500. So this is a $500 session. Um, Most of the time, the clients aren't thinking, okay, well, if I want 10 images at $250 a piece, this is really a $2,750 session. Like
Mhm.
they don't get there because 100 reasons, like they don't believe that you're going to get 10 good pictures of them, or they can't think of why they would even want 10 great pictures of themselves. So the way we choose to present our pricing is going to attract a certain type of person. And I think that most photographers, um, if pressed against the wall, like I hate to say things like gun to your head, but like if I was to really push you and say, okay, why are you doing this? Well, I think my customers are dumb, and they are more likely to say yes to 250 plus 250 than 400 plus 100. Um, like that is it's both, they're both $500 sessions, but for whatever
Right.
reason, they've decided that this is going to benefit them. And maybe it does, especially if they believe it. Like they will will that into existence. Um, but I keep my pricing high for a number of reasons. One is I live 45 minutes away from my studio. I don't want to go in to do a $500 photo shoot. Like that is not enough money for me to disrupt my life and go do that. And I've gotten my business to a point to where I don't have to. Um, so similarly, I do not get a lot of clients that just want one picture of themselves. And to take that one step further, I've started to narrow in on who my ideal client is, and most of them are in the service industry, um, meaning that they provide a service to customers. Most of them are entrepreneurial, meaning that they value things like time and they're trying to build brand and things like that. Um, so ultimately what it came down to was creating a website that attracted a certain type of client. So what you may or may not have noticed as you went around my website is there's like, I'm not kidding, there's probably 30 pictures of me on the website, which to some people will say, man, this dude must be vain. Like he must love the way he looks.
Or he doesn't have a very good portfolio because he's just got to show pictures of himself.
But the reality is very different. What I'm doing is I'm teaching my clients how they can use their images and why they might want 10 pictures of themselves. And little things move the needle. And if you add up enough little things, you start to create something that really cooks. Now, I keep on talking about my strategies and what I'm doing and why I'm
Right.
doing it. They're all very unique to me. And while in theory, like you could run what I do through your filter and come up with your own version of that, that's going to be super authentic to you. What most photographers do is they don't trust their filter. So it's, okay, Mike's doing this, I'm going to do that too. And then I'm going to yell at him when it doesn't work. It's like, well, you don't even like music. Like you can't play this record.
No, so
You don't have a record player.
No, 100%. And I tell people this, that like and it's it's something that's happened over time for me, and where I've grown is, I mean, one of the first influences for me for photography was just like you. It was Peter Hurley, right? I mean, and I don't make my living off of headshots mostly. I mean, I do a small percentage and everything, but I love Peter. I love what he does. Peter and I, he was here in Houston a few months ago, and he's always going, you need to be an associate photographer. I'm like, it's not really something I really care about right now. And I don't think he likes hearing that, but it's just like, it's just not something that I have a priority to do right now. And, and I told him, I told him that, and he goes, you know what? Your business is doing fine without headshots. You don't, I get it, but he had a couple of drinks, so he was talking in that kind of thing, but it like having that recognizing, but anyway, I digress. Peter was a huge influence to me when I first started, but because the first set of videos I got, and I told Peter this, it's like my brother-in-law gave me a pirated version of his first set of, f-stopper headshot videos or something.
Art behind the headshot.
Yeah. And so I watched all those. I was mesmerized by his personality, of how he does things, how he works with clients, how he shoots, how he lights, and all that kind of stuff. So I took a lot of that with me as I went. But one of the things that took me a long time to figure out, and this is what you're talking about right here, is I wanted to be Peter. I didn't want to be John, And so like I would say the things that Peter would say. I got I think it's changed over the years, but the Hurleyisms like app, and it had all the things that Peter would say during a session to get reactions and get whatever. And I I bought a phone stand that sat on a on a tripod, and it was like, literally, if you're watching the screen here, it was like next to my face, next to my camera, so I could look over and go, point your belly button to the Statue of Liberty, and I would say,
everybody was doing that. Yeah.
What's that?
Everybody was doing that.
No, but I'm just saying, but it took me a long time to realize I had to find my voice. I had to find what John should say that comes out naturally, and how that conversation should go, and not try and be like Peter Hurley, just like what you're saying. You shouldn't try and be somebody else. Like I love your website. There's so many things that I'm like, dude, I would love to do that with my website, but I don't want to be Mike Schacht. You know what I'm saying? I want to be John Glaser. And so how could I take pieces of that? Because like I'm sitting here looking at it when you were talking about, there's like 30 pictures of me. I'm looking here at the FAQs, and it's like, you have a makeup artist, and it's like the makeup artist is in the background. You're in the foreground. The picture is really about you, and the makeup artist is in the background. I mean, but every one of these, most of the photos are about, like, have pictures of you, and it's talking about different FAQs that you're talking about. So I just love that part of what you're saying, but be who you want to be. Like I went through a time where I was trying to be Mike Sansone with my website, because like if you see my website, it was Mike Sansone. He even called me out on it. I'm like, I'm guilty, but you emulate people that you admire, first of all, I think, which is a humbling thing for photographers and stuff. But the other side of it too is you got to be who you are and do what is best for you and your image and whatever you're doing. And I don't think it's just website. I think it's just everything, how you work with clients, how you talk to clients. You know, I mean, I love your idea of the cookies, but it's just like I'm not gonna go put a stove in my my thing and say, oh, I got to do it because Mike, it's working for Mike, you know, and all that stuff. But you know, try and find something that works for me, and you know that might not be cookies. You know, like it might be something else.
But here's where we get back to the psychology and end of things. And when I think of the photographers that I've worked with and talked to and helped over the years, and then even myself, first you go through the imitation phase, and a lot of us were trying to do Peter, and Peter's larger than like he is a very he's not the easiest person to copy.
No, he's not.
Uh, just because he's so big, he's larger than life,
Yeah.
and a lot
Well,
of
he's
us.
got a very boisterous personality, you know, and not everybody can be that. And what I find, and you might say the same thing, is most creatives are introverted, you know, and Peter's like I've observed Peter from afar, and I feel like he's an extrovert introvert. He needs his introvert time, right? From what I watch him, but he is so extroverted in energy. You know, he's always bringing it. Like every time he's in front of you, he's bringing it, you know, and not every creative is like that. Most people are very reserved, and to bring it, it's very painful. You know what I'm saying? So back to
um,
what you were saying.
but if we go to like, okay, what is the actual problem? The actual problem, I don't think, is trying to emulate what somebody else is doing. I think that that is a step on a path.
Mhm.
We get to the actual problem, I think, and maybe there's a relationship to this whole introvert extrovert thing, but I think that a lot of us just straight up don't like ourselves, let alone love ourselves. Um, and the more you love yourself, the easier it is to market in an authentic way. The more you're trying to hide who you really are and project something that you're not, the less authentic you come across, the more like a used car salesman you come across.
Mm.
And that's where I feel, as I'm cruising LinkedIn or Instagram or other people's websites, it's like, okay, used car salesman, used car salesman, used car salesman. And it's not that there's anything wrong with being a used car salesman. It's a it's a great way to make a buck. But if we approach everything from the idea of let's build brand first and let's let everything else follow, you never get to the starting line because you can't build brand until you're ready to be authentic.
Right.
Um,
You don't know what your brand is just walking into it most of the time. You got to find out what your brand is as you go, you know?
so during, we'll say 2022, probably at some point, maybe 2023, time's been just flying for me. But I watched this Netflix documentary, and it was called Stutz, and it was Jonah Hill. Stutz is his therapist, and he wanted to make this movie about his therapist. And I don't want to get too far into the spoiler end of things, but the short version is that what Jonah realized was that what Stutz taught him how to do or gave him permission to do was to love himself. Um, and they get into some of the science behind it, and what he refers to it as is your shadow self. And the shadow self requires a lot of energy to hide.
Mm.
Um, so if there are things about yourself you don't like for example, when we started this show today, you asked for my backstory. I intentionally did not start it at the beginning, um, which was a mistake. I was a little unsure about like, okay, how much time can I spend talking about this? But the
Right,
truth
right.
is that when I was 22 years old, I was uh, a second year senior in college. My liver died. I was in a hospital for months and months and months while they tried to figure it out. I never ended up finishing school. I was forced to take a job so that I could get insurance. Like those are all important details of who I am and what's shaped me. Now, 2 years ago, before watching that movie, that would have been my shadow self. Like I would be scared to death for you to ask me, oh, well, where did you go to college? And I would find probably some way to pivot and say I went to Ball State. But I probably wouldn't volunteer that I never graduated because that's something that I've got, or up until recently, had some shame around. And the reality is that I could talk to you for an hour about what it was like to go through liver failure. I could talk to you for an hour about later in life realizing that I'm a bit of a functional addict, and it took um, some bad things happening to recognize that there can be good characteristics that come out of being a functional addict. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at research. Um, I'm really good at going down rabbit holes. So if you shine some light on whatever you're trying to hide, it's like, oh, I can breathe now. I'm not working so hard to hide this little bit about myself. And now we can start making real progress.
Right.
Okay. Because I'm not using all that energy. It's a lot of energy to hide what you don't like about yourself. And maybe it's the way you look, or maybe you don't think you're good enough at taking pictures, or maybe you grew up in a bad environment. But if if you don't have honesty with yourself about these things, then it's very difficult to make progress.
Yeah.
And when we, again, going to that idea of brand and authenticity and all these things, like, yeah, maybe that story wasn't significant to your viewer, um, but I'm sure that I connected with somebody. Like somebody is going to have some type of relationship with addiction, or somebody's going to have some type of relationship with quitting school or taking a job because they needed the insurance. Like I shared, and I doubt you think less of me for having shared that. But I think that 2 years ago, I would have assumed or expected that I would be thought of as less than for sharing that information. So I would have hid it.
No, that's, I mean, it's great. And it's totally off topic of anything we're talking about, but it's so true. Like that, like being an authentic you in your business and being who you are and trying not to be like, we keep going back to this, and we talked about, well, like Peter and stuff. Don't try and be like Peter. Don't try and be like Mike. Don't try and be like John. I mean, I have people that come, they think that if I do everything John does, and whatever, then my business is gonna be great. And I'm like, yeah, like I can give you stepping stones of what to do, but don't try and do everything the way I'm doing. Because like I'll be honest, there's things that I wish I didn't do. Like I wish I wasn't doing that, but I'm doing it. I like one of the things I've talked about lately is like I don't want to be a volume studio forever. I want to be like more succinct to get the perfect clients all the time, and have maybe the little bit higher pay, or like what they're paying, and not do as many sessions, because it's a journey that I've created for myself that it's hard to back off, and it takes time to back off of that, and but you don't come to that realization right away, so it's like sometimes when I first started doing it, I was like, oh, this is great, like I mean, it's awesome, and I I feel successful doing this and all that stuff, but then it's just like, man, the grind of the stress that comes with that, like I don't want to have this all the time. I want to back it off over time, so I get it, man. And one of the things that people don't understand that haven't been doing this for a long time is you won't learn that on day one. It takes time. And I'm sure like you could say the same thing. Like you went from selling Groupons to, doing what you like. I don't go to the studio for $500 because it's 45 minutes away, and that's a big pivot, like I don't go to the studio every day, where when you first start out, you feel like you have to be at the studio every day or you're not making money or you're not going to be doing business or whatever, and so but that takes time, and that takes learning, and that takes having conversations like this with other photographers and listening to other photographers talk about it for themselves that have been doing it and gone through this before with themselves.
I think there are other things that have to happen too, though. Like ta- I don't have to run AdWords. I don't even really have to do social. I'm going to get back into social surely to help people in my group so that they can see what good social looks like. But I don't need it because I'm very good at staying connected to people. I'm very good at asking for referrals. I'm looking at what, like, it's May 1st when we're recording this.
Mhm.
I'm looking at my schedule for the month and I'm like, I've got 5K plus jobs on here, and it's not volume headshots. It's like I'm doing advertising campaigns and commercial work now, um, because I'm okay with, yeah, you know what, you're just not my customer, and
Right.
that's okay because I've got these people over here, and if these people weren't paying me buckets and buckets of money, then I may not have ever gotten to the point where I was comfortable saying no to work. There's so much power in being just successful enough to feel confident to say no to something.
Totally.
Um, and sometimes that's accidental, and those accidents are what keep us from making progress. Sometimes it's like I know lots of people um, that sometimes jobs fall into their lap and it becomes problematic. It's like, okay, I was just getting ready to, we'll say, relaunch my website, but this $10,000 gig just fell into my lap. I'm going to do this work. Maybe I don't need to fix things, and we talk ourselves out of it. So we get lucky now and again, and that's enough to keep us from actually making progress. So it's a weird, like, love hate. It's like I love that I got this gig, but what did taking this $10,000 gig really cost me? Because it prevented me from making progress on my marketing, which long term would have been way more advantageous, way more valuable. It's going to touch a lot more people.
So, like with that, one of the things I mean, it just popped into my head. If you were to start over, at the beginning of your journey, knowing what you know now, you've been doing this for a while now, and you've gotten to a point where now you're successful, you're doing things, from at least from the outside looking in, right, and everything. What would you give uh, Mike Schacht 2008 advice, when you were first kind of starting this whole thing, knowing what you know now?
That's tough. Probably,
No Groupons.
probably do, like, make confidence my biggest priority, because I feel like when we are confident, we make better decisions. Whether it's confidence in sharing a perspective, sharing a point of view, whether that's confidence in not overselling things. Like, when I look at other photographers' websites, I all I see is lack of confidence. Because you're selling and selling and selling and selling and selling, and then you're doing that, but you're also throwing in these huge wordy paragraphs that no one's going to read. The biggest change for me in my business was when I stopped creating content for an algorithm and started creating content for myself. So I don't really care about SEO, at least not as much as I think a lot of people do, because when you get to my level, um, and I don't mean to sound like I'm talking down to other people, but
Yeah,
like,
no, no, I get it.
um, the average person searching for a headshot on Google is not going to book me. Um, they're not going to book me because I'm trying to turn them off. Like, I don't want someone that just needs a picture of themselves as a client. Um, that is not the service that I provide. Um, so the freedom that I'm given to not really care about SEO when it comes down to creating a website that has a cool vibe and makes people actually feel something. Most of the time, the content that most photographers are putting on their websites do more to screw up their conversion than help. So, okay, I've mastered the SEO game. I've got lots and lots of traffic, but I've got no conversion. And
Mm,
that's the problem that I see most photographers struggle with. Um, is once they, take a class on SEO or attend a workshop or watch some video, it's like, okay, I need to SEO my images and I need to SEO this content. And we need to get into header tags, and we need to, I call it the trifecta. Like, it's one of my buzzwords where we've got keywords that match in the images and in the header tags and in the text and all of that stuff. once you start trying to manipulate an algorithm, you're usually shooting yourself in the foot on the conversion side of things.
Mm,
And that's a balancing act that's really difficult to walk. Um, so if you give yourself permission to say, you know what, Google's not that important.
mm,
And unpopular opinion, like you ask 100 photographers, 99 of them are going to say that Google is why they're successful. Good for you. Um, I would challenge them that Google allows them not to focus on other areas of their work. And if they're really honest with themselves, they don't get to create the work they want to make because they're too busy catering to an algorithm. We take that same principle and we can apply it to social. If every post I put out, I'm thinking about, okay, well, what's going to get the most engagement? Well, what good is engagement if no one's booking you? Like if, oh yeah, I saw this post or this I saw this picture you posted and there's some text on it and there's a call to action at the bottom. If my takeaway is you're kind of soulless and you're just another photographer trying to
right,
manipulate me,
right.
um, talk about what you want to talk about. Because chances are you are much more likely to come across somebody that shares your feelings and now they feel empowered to talk about it. I hang out in a lot of um, audio forums. Like I'm a big audiophile geek. Like we don't even want to talk about how many stereo systems there are around the house. But I spend time on those forums, and what I've learned is that the people that talk on those forums feel very empowered because they feel very comfortable with their beliefs. And there's a lot of like snake oil in the audio world where it's like, oh, this cable is going to um, make your highs higher and your bass is going to sound tighter and all these things. Um, so there's lots of opportunity for people to bicker, and watching that bickering is really just, hey, these people have lots of confidence on this topic, so engagement is through the roof. Like, uh, I want to emulate that. Not that I want to like sell snake oil, but like I want to create content that people can have a point of view on, so they feel comfortable engaging with the content. And maybe that means I'm not talking about photography. Maybe I am talking about photography, but I am. When we post pictures of our work, I don't think our clients feel confident commenting on it. Like,
Mm.
I don't know if this is good or bad. I don't. Good for you. I might throw a heart on it, but more often than not, like they're just confused and they don't know what to think. But ask them what their favorite restaurant in town is, and oh, you're gonna get shit. Like people are gonna go bonkers fighting over one another. No, 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 no. That's not where you go for a steak. You go here, and um, I think we can all do better by sharing more.
No, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. Like my studio manager and I, like we talk a lot about like the social media and stuff. She runs the majority of our social media stuff and everything, and we're always like, man, how can we do this better? And I know we can do it better. It's just, like you said, it's just how much effort do you care to put into that kind of thing to make it better? But like by doing that kind of stuff, it does make, it's the 1%, like if I do a 1% here better, if I do 1% there better, if I do 1% there better, it just elevates my business, right? So, um, all that's really good. What I love and what I hear you saying too is one of the things that's great about like what you're doing is like not just you started off like the SEO website guru, right? Like that was your thing. And now it's just like that's not such a big deal to me. It's more about relationships, it's more about this, it's more about that. And but like what you've done is you've taken what you were able to start with those kind of things, built those relationships have turned into other relationships that have now that's where you're getting your clients so that you don't have to worry so much about that other stuff, right?
Totally.
um, yeah, so I think that's a really wise way of looking at things, especially if you're trying to do your business in a sense of like, I don't need to do 400 sessions a year. I need to do what I want to do and need to do to get the people in the door, and build on that. But I think the relationship side of it is, I think we could all do better at that. I
Sure.
mean, for me, it's like, it's a different kind of thing where for a while I was taken completely out of a lot of sessions because I had a person that was doing photos and I had a person that was doing the sales session. So they never met John Glaser, and my name's on the marquee. But at the same time, I had to go through the mentality of like, Olin Mills didn't go and photograph all his customers, and they were a multi-million-dollar company, but what I've done is I've changed some things in the last several months where I am more involved. I'm not doing all the sessions, but I'm still doing the sales sessions, but I still have that relational component. And I've missed that, like I've missed that kind of relational thing. I love doing the photography side of it too because of the relational thing, and everything. So I think there is a lot to be said about the relational. So if you're listening and your biggest takeaway out of this today is be relational, like be relational with whoever's in front of your camera, even if it's a short period of time or a long period of time, however long that is, make sure that you're creating that relationship with them. Maybe that they're not going to bite you to a party, but like that you're memorable, and that when people come to you and when people ask you what was your experience like with John or Mike or whatever, they're talking not so much like, I like this, like I put it to the people this way. When you go to my Google reviews, notice how much it's about the experience and different things, and it's hardly ever about the photos, and that's, I think, where we need to grow and be better at when it comes to our stuff. You were about to say something.
Um, I don't remember what I was going to say,
It's all
but
right. It's all right.
I have another thing that I wanted to make sure didn't slip through the cracks. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Okay, so going back to rewinding 15 years and giving myself advice, another piece of advice that I think would have saved me a whole lot of money would be to run everything through my filter and ask myself, is this really going to solve a problem?
Mm.
So I know lots of people that buy lots and lots and lots of gear. And gear is important. Gear is oftentimes what allows us to do what we need to do. But whether I'm dealing with a flex panel, a knockoff flex panel, a softbox, a nanlite strip like pavo tube thing, like I can do my light, I can make it look like my work with whatever I have. So I should have spent a lot less money on gear over the years, and it took me too long to realize that. I think similarly, the other trap we fall into is there's lots of gurus out there now. Um, I think everyone's saying the same thing.
Mm.
They say it with in a different tone. Um, but I think we as photographers have been programmed to believe that there is a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 step
Totally. Yeah.
solution to problems. And the problem isn't the salute, like the problem isn't what we think it is. The
Right.
problem is here. It's like right between our ears. It's uh, I don't need to go to 50 workshops to learn how to use LinkedIn. It's not that complicated platform. Uh,
Right. Right.
or I don't need to buy.
Well, and I don't know if you're
Somebody's
like
selling
this, but I go to workshops anymore, and I get more out of these kind of conversations than I do from the workshop.
Oh, it's absolutely about the networking for
Yeah,
sure.
and it's just having real talk with people that are in the same phase or like growing into their business stuff. It's like, I have it happen all the time. It's like, what's your 7-step plan to get me clients? I'm like, well, I do a lot of marketing through Facebook and Instagram, and here's how I do it. But there's so many other steps in between, like after that happens. And so it's just like, if you just teach somebody how to market, I could teach you how to market on Facebook and get a bunch of leads, but then you come back to me and go, well, none of them became clients. I'm like, well, because there's a lot to that too, and then and then then you'll say, well, here's what I do to get them to become clients. Well, that didn't work for me. And I'm like, like it's not a foolproof plan, you know? I mean,
It doesn't exist. Like
no, it doesn't. And I'm pivoting and I'm changing as time goes on too, you know, because it's just like sometimes what works today doesn't work tomorrow, you know? And
but
so,
if you're taking a class on something or reading a book on something, it's probably already outdated.
right. Like I had a guy that was wanting me to work with him, and I was working with him, and like he was like, I followed everything exactly the way you wanted me to do it. And I'm like, great. He goes, but it's not working. So I'm like, I mean, well, let me help you with that. And we're like, well, I don't want to talk anymore. I'm like, okay, cool. It's like, I can help you maybe figure out, because I've had to problem solve just like you do. Like, hey, why is this not working in my business? And let's make some tweaks and let's make some changes. But if you don't try those tweaks, like it's like I mentioned it earlier. My wife and I had this conversation about the philosophy and the psychology more than anything, about how you present pricing on a pricing sheet. I made a little change on a pricing sheet, and my pricing or my average sale has dipped considerably. And it's since that, I mean, I looked at the date that, because when I changed my pricing sheet, like I have a Google, and I make a new doc and I date that doc with the date that I started that new pricing, whatever change, no matter how big or small it is. And I could go back to my sales from that date on and go, that's got to be the problem, because from that date on, it dropped off considerably, you know? So, but you know, you have to try and do those kind of things and have the metrics to measure that. That's a whole different topic for another take.
Similarly, I'm guessing at some point you've consumed the TNT content, like the idea
Totally.
of doing
Yeah.
IPS.
If
And
I do it exactly like Tony does it, then you know, it'll come. But it's, again, that part of it is part of, for me, it's a personality thing. I'm not going to sell it the exact same way it was taught here, because that's just not how I do things. I do it a little bit different, you know. But anyway, I digress. You go ahead.
it was a fundamental shift. Like I do not want to downplay the value proposition of what that video content did for my business. It was huge. Do I do it now? No. But to your point about personality, I made a decision about 2 years ago. I've done a lot of personal growth in the last 2 years, but about 2 years ago, I said, with every scenario that comes up, like if I have to make a decision about something, should I do this? Should I zig? Should I zag? Um, I ask myself one question, and that's, is this how I would want to be treated? And ultimately, for me, and I'm not saying that other people are doing this wrong, but I would hate to be in a photo shoot and have to do a sales call afterwards
Mm,
uh, as a customer.
mhm.
I would feel pressured, especially when you hear how some of these people are doing stuff where it would be, okay, well, when you walk out the door, I'm going to delete these pictures. And that is a valid plan. If that's your thing, like I'm not hating on that. I'm saying it's not right for me. If
Yeah,
I were the client, I'd feel like, okay, I'm being taken advantage of. Um, and again, that's Mike Schacht's filter.
totally.
But so I went back to doing galleries, which I thought I would never do again. So I've maintained the per image pricing. Um, and I think part of it is the clientele that I'm dealing with. Um, Usually my clients have some type of PR person, or they have uh, there is a web developer as part of a conversation that is going to need certain aspect ratios and things like that. I found like I kept on having to justify to people, well, I'm the expert, so we should sit down together and go through these pictures. And I could see the reactions on people's faces, like, are you though? And
Yeah.
uh,
I know what we need for our business and our marketing. Why would you like tell
yeah,
me what I need for my business and my marketing?
so I had to retreat, and my fear was, because again, most of us operate from places of fear, but my fear was, okay, if I do this, if I go back to galleries, my my sales are going to go down. Like I had gotten to the point where the average session for me is usually about 10 pictures. Like I'm selling 10 images. They're $200 each, $500 session fee. So an average shoot to work with me is about $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that process does not work with the $2,500 client, at least not with the $2,500 business client that I'm attracting. And I had to pivot and do something different. Now I feel a lot better about what I'm doing. I sell in a way like I'm not ever coming off as salesy. Like I honestly tell people I don't care what you buy.
Yeah.
Um, and I go through the session with them and we have a talk about, okay, what problems are we trying to solve with these pictures? Another thing that Tony told me to stop doing. Um, but it works for me. When I stopped doing the IPS, um, I realized that I was talking people out of pictures by putting it all on them and letting them take as much time as they needed. Um, I I work so hard during a session to create such a wide variety of work that it really is difficult for them not to buy more and more pictures.
No, yeah, and that's what you should be doing.
So I was convinced that I was going to lose money doing this. I was convinced that a best case scenario is that I would break even, and the reality was that my average per image per session is up 2 or 3 pictures,
Mm,
which is $500 or $600. Like that's not a small amount of money.
right.
Um,
Well, and I think too, like what you're saying is, and I think there's a fear with photographers in general. Like, if I don't make the sale right then and there, then it's not going to happen, And so I think that, eh, for better, for worse, for whatever you want to call it. I mean, I've gone far away from that high pressure, I'm going to delete your images and if we, whatever type of thing. And I haven't done that in a long, long time. But what I've done more, even more so in the last several months, is, you know, it's a different thing with the kind of clientele that I'm dealing with as opposed to you're dealing with more businessy clients and kind of stuff more so. But for me, it's just like, you know, my clients, it's what is your budget? Do you have a budget? Like, and what do you want to do with these photos at the end of the day? Right. And I have to be okay with what that is because I don't want to sell you something that you don't want and that you don't need, and I know for a fact that we've had some times in the past that we probably sold people stuff because it's like, hey, you really need this. And they're like, no, I don't. I just want this. Um, and so asking those questions, I feel like people feel more valued because they're like, now you're helping me create what I want and not what you want me to have because it's the right price point for you to make a sale, right? And at the end of the day, I think people are happier even if it's a lower sale, I mean, because sometimes it's a lower sale, but I've made them happy because they actually walked away with something. Because I've had people that are like, I can't really afford much of anything with you, but I want something. Like, well, here are your options. And then I lay them out, and instead of like, well, this is what it is. And, my best package price is $2,000. And it's just like, if you don't buy that, then you're SOL. And I think there's a different mentality that comes across and a different relational, different vibe. You don't come across, as you mentioned it, the used car salesman type of thing, but you're like actually caring about what your clients get at the end of the day and not what you're getting at the end of the day, which it's a win-win, I think, at the end, when it's all said and done. So
if you feel better about how you do business, it's absolutely a win-win.
yeah, totally. Yeah, you're like I when I first started, because it was how I was taught. Um, I did I wasn't all sold into, if you don't buy it today, I'm going to delete them. I never went that
I
direct.
absolutely use those words.
I never did that. I never did that. But I did because it was how I was taught. It was, hey, come in for a session. Don't show them the prices until after they've seen the photos, and I don't subscribe to that in any way, shape, or form. I want you to see like what our average person spends. This is the price, and all that kind of stuff. But like the problem that you have when when you do it the other way is obviously you get people that are bitter and they're like, well, I didn't know you were so expensive. I wouldn't have wasted my time or whatever, right? But then when you do it the right way, you might not get those clients because they then know what your cost and then they might not go, I can't afford you and I'm not, but then you're not wasting your time on them, right? So it's just, trying to find that balance of like, but like you said, do you what makes sense to do but don't do something that's just like you don't feel good about at the end of the day. Like I never felt good about not presenting the prices before, but that's how I was taught when I first, and it worked. And so I was like, ooh, I'm going to do this. But I always felt icky after that was over with. So I didn't do it for a long period of time before I started sharing prices before people came in because I was just like, I don't feel right. Here's the way I put it, and you probably would say the same thing. How would I feel if I was that client? you know,
Absolutely. It's exactly what I said. Every decision I make, I run through my personal filter of how would this make me feel, and um, it's been so freeing because it's never. I've got so much more confidence in my responses to things because it's coming from my heart. Like, and I get that I'm starting to like sound a little cheesy, but literally, like every decision I make about the business comes from right here. And I
totally.
am able to speak so much more eloquently or confidently or whatever you want to say, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I just because I have so much confidence in my gut, which is another thing I don't think is prevalent enough. Um, but maybe that's because we're doing things we're not comfortable with.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. It's that whole psychology thing, and you were talking about it from the psychology of our clients or that position, and I'm coming at it from the psychology of us, the photographer, and it becomes a complicated relationship to manage.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and it goes back to the overlying thing that we keep talking about. What is going to work for you in your business that makes you comfortable, that makes sense to you? Because there's a billion different ways to do business, and not every one of them is the perfect way of doing business, and it has to fit your personality, your brand, your whatever you name it. Like it has to fit what you're doing, and it like at the end of the day, I think too, it has to energize you. I think if it's like not energizing you and you're not like like I said, when I first started, I was like, I felt icky. That's not very energizing when you feel icky. If you feel good about what you're doing, then you have that energy to keep going and do more, right? So, man, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We could like talk for hours. I feel like we've been on here for an hour already, but Mike, I appreciate you so much for giving me the time. Like, we started off talking about websites and we went in so many other directions that it was just like really cool. And I think a lot of people can get a lot out of this, of just like, there's so much more to business than just, hey, let's put together a pretty website or whatever, but more of like, find the place that fits you and your business and don't try and be like everybody else. Don't try and be like any one person or whatever, but also I love what you said about just like being okay to be honest with yourself and feel like, all those kind of things. But this is definitely a feel good podcast episode. But I appreciate you giving me the time. Appreciate you being here, and your great words of wisdom. Every time I hear you speak, I remember sitting in on podcasts or, your live cast that you and Mike would do, with the headshot hot sauce. And I didn't go there all the time, but every time I did, it was just like, oh, a little nugget of information from Mike. So I appreciate you being on here today. Thanks so much. Where could people find you if they were wanting to learn more about like headshot hot sauce and different things that you're doing when it comes to business and what you're doing in your own business?
Okay, so let's do this because again, going back to that idea of just treating people the way you would want to be
Yeah.
treated. I can think of when I was coming up, I would email photographers and ask them to have coffee with me. And more often than not, I would just get blown off. And every now and again, somebody would say yes. And when I think back to the the moments in my life that were impactful to my growth as a photographer, a lot of them go back to those kind of coffee dates.
Mm.
So if somebody wants to pick my brain or learn more about me, go to the 312 Elements website. It's 312elements.com. Book a consultation. and let's just chat for a half hour.
There you
Uh,
go.
and that is my gift to the audience.
That's awesome, man. Hey, 30 minutes with Mike is a great thing. No, I appreciate that. Like, I will put your website down in the show notes and everything. But Mike, it's been a pleasure having you, and I love talking to you and all that stuff. Good luck with everything that you continued success.
Oh,
And
thanks.
again, thanks again for being on here today.
You got it. I appreciate you and what you're doing here. I think you're providing a great and needed service to your audience.
All right, thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you later, bud.